Okay, it's starting. There we go. It's saying it started.
All right. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Barbara, and thanks for welcoming me in this seminar. And so I'm going to talk about this method, so the situated assessment method, and I'm gonna be fully open about the fact that habits is not my field, and my contribution in this work is more methodological. However, we thought with Larry Barsalou that it was a very valuable tool also in the field of habit, and that's why it is actually the first paper that we produced that used this method, the situated assessment method. So this method was developed in the context of grounded and situated cognition. So to present this theory, it's usually better to describe his first opponent. So to contrast it with the alternative, which is the classic model of cognition. So the classic model of cognition suppose that there is first perception, and then there is cognition, and then there is action. It's often described also in a not very nice way as a sandwich model, with action and perception being the buns and cognition being the feeling. The idea here is that what's important is cognition, to describe cognition, but perception and action has little role to describe cognition. They just act as input and output of the system. So, for instance, for just like a computer, if you change the mouse, if you change the screen, it's not going to change the way the unit will work. It's not going to change the way the processor will work. So here you really have isolated models with cognition being the center of it. In the view of grounded cognition, instead, cognition emerged from a large set of models, a large set of systems. Sorry. So here you have cognition that emerged from the interaction between modalities, physical environment, cognition, the body, and the social environment. So instead of being independent models, they are all cognition emerged from the interaction of all these systems. So another central theme of grounded cognition is the important role of action and of goal-directed action in particular. So from this perspective, cognition doesn't typically operate in a vacuum. Instead, cognition largely exists to support goal-directed action that serve a person's needs in the physical and social environment. So one way to characterize this idea is what Larry Barsalou called the situated action cycle. The situated action cycle describes actually the typical iterative structure of everyday situations. So it can be described as follows. So first there is environment with the entities, the events, everything in the environment, and this environment will be processed. The self-relevance of this environment will be processed with the goals, values, norms, identity of the situation, which will create affect, motivation, emotion, which will in turn produce action and outcome. So the reward, the surprise that will produce the action, and this will create change in the environment and start a new cycle. So this is not something new that is really new. This cycle is actually being evoked in the literature largely already, like in theory of conditioning, of goal pursuit, of narrative, etc. But what we want to convey here is that this cycle, is actually provides a natural way of integrating the domain of grounded cognition, because here, as this figure illustrates, so cognition will emerge from the coupling of the brain-body environment, and this coupling of the brain-body environment would be orchestrated by the situated action cycle. So the environment initiates the cycle, then the cognitive system will compute self-relevance. The affective system produces emotion and motivation, which in turn produce action, which in turn produce outcomes. So here I forgot the animation. So the idea of the coupling of cognition, body, and environment. So the study of grounded cognition largely, since the beginning, has focused on the study of basic cognitive processes, so memory, language, and like language comprehension in particular, reasoning. And here, the idea that we started with with Larry Barsalou is to extend the study of grounded cognition to health behaviors, so physical health, but also mental health. So very shortly, so what are the implications of grounded cognition for health cognition? So at least the way we want to apply grounded cognition to health cognition is the idea that health behaviors can be viewed as situated actions. So we perform a behavior in a given situation, and this results from the coupling between brain, body, environment. Health habits result from repeated association of the situated action cycle. So each time we repeat a habit, this cycle will repeat, and this will produce situational patterns in memory. So each iteration will produce a new situation. It will create a new pattern in memories. These patterns will of course overlap partially because they will be probably they will be in similar situations. So this different population of situational pattern different population will arise depending on individuals, depending on each individual experience of the behavior. And so this population will reflect for each participant their individual histories of situational action in the domain that is studied. In this context, what we are going to talk today is self-report measures, or self-report instruments that a classical tool to assess health behavior through individual differences. So before continuing, let's look at different items of a different psychometric test that are quite widely used. So for instance, for the self-control scale that we're going to use today, actually, I am able to work effectively toward long-term goals. The perceived stress scale, in the last month, how often have you found that you could not cope with all the things that you had to do? The 3-factor eating questionnaires, how likely are you to consciously eat less than you want? So what I want to attract your attention on here is that if you look at this, you might wonder, like for instance, I am able to work effectively toward long-term goals. I might be tempted to say, well, it depends. It depends which goal we are talking about. Like if my long-term goal is to finish this series on Netflix, I might be motivated differently that if my long-term goal is, I don't know, to lose weight. They will be very different situations, very different long-term goals. And for all these questions, they're actually the same thing, like it depends. And the problem is that many of the questionnaires that we use in research include general decontextualized items. And so all these items where we might be tempted to say, well, it depends on the situation. Sorry. And so here the idea is that all these items, all these questions, they typically do not assess specific situations in their respective health domain. For instance, for stress, we might ask how much stress do you experience when giving a talk in particular, which might be the same as in another situation. So as a result, the result of this question might be inaccurate to some extent. They might reflect, for instance, the intuitive theories of our personality and not direct experience. So, for instance, what I think about myself, do I see myself as being a stressed person or not? Or maybe a subset of memories in a particular situation. So the thing is that when we're going to have to answer to a question like, for instance, I am able to work effectively toward long-term goals, what I'm going to have to do is to retrieve from memory, like the whole bunch of situations when we have long-term goals, and try to kind of average across all these situations about all. And this is not a very easy thing to do, and that's why we are thinking, oh well, that depends on the situation, because our brain is not very good at average across situations across our life. And so we might just retrieve a subset of these memories and just like compute these memories, these situations, and just like answering in this context, in this very large context. So our point here is the effective assessment of a health behavior should require the assessing of individual rich situational experience in the domain. So assessing, like taking into account all the situational experience, or like a big part of the situational experience in the domain, and assess the situational experience from the perspective of the situated action cycle that I'm going to develop now. And I'm going to calm down now. Okay. So let's talk now about the SAM square. So and specifically the SAM square habitual behavior instrument, the SAM square HBI. Okay. So as I said, health behaviors can be viewed as situated actions. So to measure that, to take that into account, SAM square assesses two dimensions of situatedness. The first one is that it tries to capture the rich situational experience in a health domain. So to do so, it will typically sample a large set of representative situations. So like a large set can be from 40 to 150. I think that's the maximum we did for food. So the idea is that we would assess a population of situational memories. So this can be, so we have different methods to do that. Either we ask participants to self-generate the situation, or we explore the literature, or we can. There are different ways to do it. The idea is that some should be typical and other atypical for each individual. So we need variance. We need variance to see, for instance, like I'm going to talk about regularity, about habitualness. So we need some that would be habitual and some that would be non-habitual to understand like what predicts the habitualness. We need variance. So then we SAM establish the features of the situated action cycle that are relevant to the health domain we are interested in. So we are going to review the literature typically to see what are the features, the variables that are relevant for the health behavior that we are going to try to study. So first, we need to target the health behavior that we're gonna choose as a dependent variable. So, for instance, the frequency of a behavior, the motivation, stress, etc., depending on what you're trying to measure. And then we want to identify in the literature the relevant predictors from the situated action cycles. So we're gonna identify a whole bunch of predictors. So there are different methods to do that that we are going to use during the assessment. So here I'm going to present this method that we apply to the measure of habits. So first, the situation sampling. So the first stage, so the first S of the SAM square. So that's the 2 is for situations. So here I just present you like a half of the behavior that we selected. So to show you a little bit the variety of the behaviors that we used. So we had like 4 behavior for 10 different domains of human activity. So we tried them to be relevant in college students because we mainly tested college students. So the sampling should be different for another population. The aim was to establish a broad representative range of common behavior that would be likely to be habitual across different life activities. And here again, we do not assume that every behavior is a habitual behavior for every individual. We simply assume that there are common habitual behaviors in the population. Here we beforehand, we divided them into two categories, so positive and negative habits in terms of, so that we called it valence later, because we know it's an important factor in habitualness. Then we selected the features that will be relevant for the SAM square from the literature. So so for each stage of the situ detection cycle, we have a bunch of variables, of predictors. So situation consistency for the environment, the rewards, both immediate and long-term reward for self-relevance, valence and conflict for the affect stage, regularity and automaticity for the action stage, and again the rewards for the outcome. So the valence is in red because it's something that we did at least for most studies, like before the experiment. We didn't establish thanks to the participant, although I'm going to talk about it later. So we decided that regularity would be our dependent variable. So we know that many measures of habitualness have been proposed, including the frequency of behavior, the consistency of the situation, the automaticity of the behavior, and we know that there are a lot of discussion about it. The idea that our take is that regularity would be the most fundamental property of the habitual behavior. That's a take. That was just how to say. How can I say it? Just a simple take. That's something that would be easy to implement with the tool, like first. So of course, automaticity and consistency are fundamental for habits. So that's why we included it in the tool anyway. And also immediate and long-term rewards, sometimes associated or not with habitual behavior, depending on whether it's seen as ballistic or not. So we included them, but we predict them to be less linked to regularity than would automaticity or consistency would. We also included valence, as I said, and conflict, that is also evoked largely in the literature, predicting that conflict should be higher with negative habits and should be linked negatively to regularity. So we ran 3 different studies in this, and these 3 studies are largely similar. So here's studies 1, because we actually ran them in 3 stages, but they are exactly the same studies. So that's why we group them under the umbrella study 1 or 1 all. And these studies, so they were so in total like more than 130 participants, and the first one were conducted in lab, and the other was conducted online. And so here we used exactly these 6 variables, so these 6 features that we measure. So here's how it looked like during testing. So for frequency, so we called it frequency here, but here, how frequently do you perform this behavior in situations where doing so is possible? So it's not in any, like in general, it's not a raw frequency that we ask participants, but the regularity of performing the behavior in relevant situations. So the example that we take in the paper is that from this perspective, attending Christmas Eve every year, Christmas Eve Mass every year is as habitual as turning off the lights every time one will leave the room, even though one is more frequent than the other, obviously. So frequency, how frequently do you perform this behavior in situation where doing so is possible? Consistency, how often do you perform this behavior in the same situations, in the same place and time? Then immediate reward. So for each of the 80 habits that we selected, participants had to rate them on these scales. So first, for all the 80 habits, they would be presented with this screen. screen. Then and then in another block, they would be presented with this screen. How much do you want to do this behavior because it feels good in the moment, and how much do you want to do this behavior because it will be good for you in the long term? And in the third block, they would be presented with other questions, so the conflict, how conflicted you feel about wanting versus not wanting to perform this behavior, and automaticity, how much you perform this behavior automatically with little thought or effort. At the end of the experiment, participants were asked to do the self-control scale and the Big Five, so that we can extract the neuroticism score for each participant. So that's what participants had to do in study 1. Study 2 and study 3 are largely similar. Study 2 was a big study. It's not in the lab; it's online. Sorry. And here it's identical. Basically, it's just that we had much more participants, so it was a big replication where we also collected other judgments that I'm not going to talk a lot, because here we're going to focus on the similarity between the studies more than in the particularities. But basically, we also collected social approval, rated valence, and motivation. So social approval was largely correlated with valence. So then we ended up dropping it in the analysis. And rated valence was actually useful to validate our assignment of valence before the experiment. So as you can see here, all what we call positive habits have actually high rated valence, like positive rated valence, and most of the negative habits have a negative rated valence. So it kind of validates our choice of our selection of negative and positive habits. Then for the study 3, we had 115 participants. Here, one difference is that we had unblocked judgments. So instead of having frequency and consistency, for instance, in the same block, they would be in different blocks. So there would be one block for each rating, for each judgment. But otherwise, it's the same experiment. And we also had metacognitive judgments that I'm going to talk about a little bit. Is that we asked participants how much they think that each predictor is impacting their behavior. So it's kind of to assess what the participants think of the impact of each of the factor we selected. So let's dive into the results. So I'm going to present you a lot of results now. Like the paper is quite dense, as you might have seen, and you will see that in the paper we had a little bit this tension between both showing that this tool is a good tool to measure habits and to measure individual difference, and also a tool that can be used for exploring habits and investigating the habits for itself, for itself. So there is a bit of a tension. There was a bit of a tension in the writing process as well, which approach we would take, which direction we would, because we couldn't do both like in the same intensity. But you'll see that a little bit in the way I'm going to present the results. So let's be a bit exploratory first. So let's show a little bit like the row, like the distribution of the ratings, each ratings for positive and negative habits. So here what we can see is that for regularity, the regularity is quite high. So 50. So it's out of it's 100 the maximum. So we have like 50 to 60 as a median, the regularity being higher for the positive habit. Well, I guess it's a good thing. Then what's interesting here, I guess, is for instance, is the conflict. As here you see that for negative habits, we indeed have a higher conflict than for positive habits. So it kind of makes sense for our, like in terms of hypothesis. So again, here it's a way to say that our measure of conflict is valid because that's what we expect. So that's what the measure of conflict here is good. It's what we would expect. Here you can see also, like for immediate reward, like for long-term reward, we have like participants rate much higher the positive habits for long-term reward, which is expected. Might be a little bit less expected is the fact that it's also the case for the for immediate reward. That also for immediate reward we have this trend of higher reward for positive behavior, I should say, positive behavior. Okay, so again here, these results are ways to prove the validity of the tool. So here in this first stage, we use a mixed model where using the with maximal testing, the mixed model where we reproduce regularity. Predicted regularity here. Okay. With basically all the 5 predictors that I defined earlier. So I want to see which one of these predictors are predicted regularity and how much they predicted. So we did that for all of our studies, and I'm going to present like the figures that is doing that for all the studies. So it's a big figure. But if you remember well, the idea was our hypothesis was that regularity will be highly predicted by automaticity and consistency, and it's exactly what we have. So consistency is largely is an important predictor of regularity, followed by automaticity, and we predicted that the rewards would still predict regularity, but to a lesser extent, which is what was happening. Balance is to some extent also predicting regularity, and however conflict is not. So this is so across all the studies we have this conflict not predicting at least in a significant way to predicting regularity. But the idea here is that most of our hypotheses, most of the thing that we should have observed, which is like the idea that regularity should be predicted by consistency, immediate reward, long-term reward, automaticity, and balance, and also the intensity of the prediction is validated by this. So it shows a certain of construct validity because it's the relation we were supposed to observe. Also, we have R-square of the model that is about 70%, which is quite high. Okay, so it shows that there also like a good content validity, showing that a large portion of the variance of regularity is taken into account by all our 6 predictors, showing that we are covering most of what's predicting regularity. So the construct of regularity. Now let's dive a little bit into the individual level, which I think is very interesting. So here again, it's very descriptive. It's really like here, what you can see here is that one row is participant, individual participant, okay, and the columns are the behaviors, And what I want to show you here is that regularity ratings vary greatly, varies greatly for each participant in each situation. So if you take any situation, any behavior, there will be participants who perform this behavior very regularly and others that don't. The question is whether this variability is just noise, or whether we can, or is it systematic variation that we can predict for each individual. So is it just noise? Is it just noise for this regression here for the group level, or is it systematic? Like, is it for each participant something that we can predict? So to do that, what we did first is that we performed the correlation between the regularity rating for each participant and the other ratings and the predictors. So here again is a heat map where you have like the column are all the predictors, and the row is each is a participant. A row is a participant, and basically what is red is high correlation between the given factor and regularity. This correlation between positive, which is red, and negative, if it's blue. So here you can see that mostly we observe the same results, where you can see that for most participants, regularity is highly correlated with consistency and automaticity, and a bit less with immediate reward and long-term reward. And you can see here for conflict, it's a little bit more. There's no like clear pattern with a lot of white cells indicating zero correlation. So it shows again a level of construct validity, but at the individual level, where we observe the relationship that we were supposed to observe according to the literature. However, one thing that I want to attract your attention on is the high individual differences here. Even for something like consistency, you can see like for participants, it seems that for this particular participant, consistency is not that important. Same for automaticity. And you see that for long-term and immediate reward is even more variable. So even though we have this similarity between the group and the individual level, we can see that in the detail for each individual, you have a relative importance of each predictor that differs, and that might be informative. For instance, not only for the habit literature, but also in a clinical perspective, showing like potential to individuate a specific profile for this patient as compared to another one. Then for content validity, what we did is actually the same. What we did is actually the same thing that we did here, but at the individual level. What we did is that we took the regularity of each participant, and we ran a model for each participant. We ran a model for each participant predicting their own regularity with their valence consistency, immediate reward, long-term reward, conflict, automaticity rating. Okay, so we ran one model for each participant. And we wanted to see whether this model for each participant were actually good predictors of their regularity ratings. Here, what you can see here is what we plotted here are R-squared. So how much variance is explained by the prediction of regularity with the predictors, with the 5 predictors. And here in blue is the R-squared of the group model. Okay, so how much the group model explained of the variance of the whole of regularity. And as you can see here, the median for the individual is actually higher than the R-square for the group. Okay, which means that on average, the individual models are actually better predictors of the regularity than the group model. Which means that the high individual variety that we observed here is actually not random noise. It's systematic variation of regularity rating that we managed to capture here, predicting this regularity for each participant with our 5 predictors. So again, it showed that we can, it's interesting because you can see for the potential of this, that predicting individual regularity with a set of predictors that would help us understanding what predict their own regularity. Okay. Is there a question? Maybe, or should I wait for the end because I'm. Should I wait? Should I wait or I wait? Okay, I'm gonna wait. Okay, now what's interesting, I think here, we couldn't talk about it a lot in the paper, is the relationship between this and between this and the awareness of the participants about what predicted their behavior. So what we did in study 3 is to ask participants for metacognitive judgments. So basically, here we asked participants what is the for them, what is the importance of the predictors in their behavior. So what is the importance of long-term reward for performing a behavior in their opinion, okay? And what we did is that we took the value, these values here, the value of the observed prediction, and the estimated prediction of the participant, and we correlated both, and see whether they agree, whether our observation agrees with the participant's estimation. And what we can see here is that they don't, mostly. So it means that what we predict is not what the participants predict. So what our model predicts differs from what the participant thinks that govern their own behavior. So again, here there might be a potential to it emphasizes a potential at the clinical level to help maybe patients, or even to help people understanding what's driving their behavior. Another way to measure validity, the construct validity, is the analysis we did with self-control and neuroticism. So what we should observe is, for instance, for self-control, is that participants should perform positive behaviors if they have good self-controls, and if they have bad self-control, they should perform more negative behavior. And that's exactly what we observed. So as you can see here, the higher their self-control here, the more they will perform positive behaviors, and the less they will perform negative behavior. So that reproduce the well-known pattern in the literature. So again, it's to show that our measure of regularity makes sense. And for neuroticism, I'm always struggling with this word. We were expecting the opposite, and that's exactly what we observed. So the more participants in neurotic, the less positive behaviors they will produce, and the more negative behaviors they will produce. And as you can see, that's what we see for across the studies. Something I forgot to say is that sometimes I present only one plot. It's because our big plots. So it's usually the plot for study 2, but actually they're all. If I show them for study 2, it's because it's the same for study 1 and 3. They're just so similar that it doesn't really make sense to present them all. So yeah, so here it's a way to show that our measure of regularity presents similar results than other experiments, other studies in the past. Then we wanted to be a bit more exploratory and wanted to see how SAM-square HAB could be used to establish habitualness. So as I said, there's there are multiple definitions of habitualness. So is that what we use so far is just saying that habits is the behavior that is performed regularly. But is it performed regularly in a consistent situation? Is a habit automatic behavior, which means that it wouldn't be modulated by reward, but would it? And so to investigate some of these questions, we actually took a different set of decisions. We decided different things, and we decided to use composite measures. The first one is that we created a composite measures of habitualness. So basically what we did is that we took what we thought are the main component of habitualness, which are regularity, automaticity, and consistency, and we created a score, habitualness score, averaging across these three variables. And we call this variable habitualness. And then we created just a reward composite score averaging across immediate, and long-term reward. So we were left with 2 scores instead of 5. And we performed a bunch of analysis to using these 2 composite measures. So again, for study 2, so we tried to see how we could do to establish habitual behavior. And so the first thing we tried is to see whether there would be some kind of obvious threshold where we could say, okay, this behavior is a habit, depending on the habitualness score. And so here, as you can see, most like at the group level, what we did, sorry, is we took each habit. And this is for each habits. This is the distribution of habitualness for the habits. So here you see that like around 25 habits had a habitualness score between 50 and 60. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of this behavior fall in the middle of the distribution around 50, and very few at the group level, at least, falls like in the very high level of habitualness. And we could do the same thing at the individual level. So here I show you the example of two participants. So here with high self-control, with a very few behavior that shows a very high habitualness score, and for this one, a very different distribution with quite a few habits, quite a few behavior that present a high habitualness score. But you can see here that it's really hard to see how, like, to set a criterion to say, okay, from this threshold, this is going to be a habit. This is going to be a habit. From this threshold, because here it's not that clear. Like and at the group level, it's even more striking. The very few behaviors are actually habitual for everyone. But so it might be easier to conceive habits, like habitualness, as a continuum more than something that behavior that would be purely habitual or purely non-habitual. That's a bit the take-home message of this slide. I'm not sure it was very clear, but it's okay. So then we wanted to investigate the relationship between habitualness and reward to see where to investigate again whether habitualness, the way at least we define it. We don't say that our definition of habitualness here is the right one. But what we can say though is that you can play around with them. We could have done something different, and you could do the same. Like depending on what you think of habits and what you think what habits are, you can adapt it to your own definition if you want. That's a flexible tool, very flexible, that you can use in many different ways. And here's the definition of habitualness we took, and we tried it to relate it to assess its relationship with reward. And here, what you can see is actually like so. This is only for study 2 again. At the group level, we can see a very high correlation between the habitualness of a habit, the habitualness of each habit, and reward. Demonstrating actually that there is a high interdependence between both constructs, between both measures, at least here. And at the individual level, as expected, so each dot here is the individual correlation. So each dot here is the individual correlation, this correlation for each participant. So the individual correlation between habitualness and reward. So for each participant is the correlation between habitualness and reward. And as you can see here, most of the time they are quite highly correlated. But again, what I want to say here is that it's highly variable. You even have some participants for whom this correlation is very low. So it's, again, it depends. It depends on people, and that might be informative to understand how is it possible, this relation. So maybe for some people, reward might be important to create habits. For some, it might not be. Then we use this individual correlation between habitual and reward, and we wanted to see the link with the personality trait that we used earlier, so self-control and neuroticism. And I'm getting late. No. Okay, I'm almost done. And what you can see here is that the more participants had self-control, the stronger becomes the relationship between reward and habitualness. So the correlation is higher when you have self-control, and it gets lower when you have neuroticism. So it suggests that self-control was associated with increased in reward monitoring. So the model, while it's the opposite for neuroticism. Okay, a little bit of discussion. It's just one slide. So the take-home message here is that SAM-Square offers a potential informative tools for capturing situational experience in habitualness, representing its content with respect to the situated action cycle, which was the two purposes of SAM-Square. So it has great potential for studying habits at the group level, but also studying the large individual differences in habits and the factors governing them. So there are also, of course, some critical issues to assess. So it's a self-report instrument with all these limits, of course. It assesses only correlation, not causation. So we can just do prediction, not, of course, causation. And we also have to assess external validity, because here we ask people, which is a problem of self-report instrument in general. We have to correlate it with real world measure. So SAM-Square can be applied to many contexts. So here we applied it to habits. We also applied it to drinking, eating, hair pulling, eco-anxiety, and many more that are still on the way. And here, something that might be important is that here we applied it in the research context. So participants had time. It took an hour to complete it, but maybe in the clinical context, that would be a bit too long, 1 hour. So it's possible to include short instruments, decreasing the number of items, decreasing the number of ratings, well, maybe focusing on the variables of interest in the clinical purpose, etc. And I would like to thank the collaborators, my collaborators on this paper, and you for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Leo. That was fabulous. Now, I'm sure there's hundreds of questions in the audience knowing who we are. We've got about 8 minutes. So if you want to ask a question, can you just quickly turn your camera on or put it into the chat? But it would be easier if you just, stick on your camera if you've got a question. And yeah, if you want to stop sharing your slides, Leo, then we can see a few more faces.
Sorry, I'm going up. Okay.
Cool. So any questions? Okay, well, I'll kick off with a question while people start thinking. What struck me was the potential to intervene. So, you know, with the strong correlation between reward and habitual behavior, and obviously frequency, do you think we could work to make people see the reward as more relevant and therefore get the frequency of the behavior to increase?
Well, I think that I don't know how much we can convince participants, like showing them the results, that it can convince them that actually reward is important. But at least it can definitely give information that like the clinician intervention that the clinician can adopt to help participant maybe change their behavior. So maybe if the patient don't seem to use a lot rewards to change their own behavior. Maybe the clinician can help to point out, or maybe you can use reward more, so reward yourself if you do this kind of this behavior or this kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, sorry, I put my camera on more just so that there's more faces on the screen, and I'm also wary of I don't want to dominate discussion like I usually do. However, I do have a question / comment. I guess my fundamental question is, how are you defining habit? Because what I and my colleagues have tried to do in our work is define habit in quite a narrow sense and say, actually, it's purely about a cue behavior association or the process that surrounds that association. And my slight concern with this is fantastic work and it's clearly highly, kind of applicable. But I wonder to what extent that very kind of narrow definition of habit as a cue behavior association can be reconciled with what you're presenting, because it seems that you're more presenting something about behavior than habit itself. And I guess related to that, could you take out the core component of like automaticity and this would still work?
So the definition of what is a habit was, of course, like one of the the first thing we talked about in the creation of this tool, and actually that's one of the first thing I said in the talk, is that there's a big disagreement on what each people might mean by being a habit, and as not being a specialist of habits about habits myself, I'm not very I'm very agnostic in like what is a habit. So however, what you can definitely use this tool in the same way, using only automaticity. So if you think that if one thing, and we could actually, for instance, the way this could, and we didn't do that, but we could see whether, for instance, take automaticity and predict automaticity with the other factors. That's exactly something we could have done, and maybe the result would have been sensibly different. We didn't try that, and it's possible that they would be also largely similar because one of the reasons automaticity and regularity are like why automaticity is a high predictor of regularity is because they are highly correlated. So probably if you put one in as predicted and the other as predictor, we might have similar results as well. So I don't know if it answered the question, but I personally remain agnostic in terms of like what is the actual definition of. But you can use Sam Square with your definition of habitualness.
I think it comes down to, and I mean, you made the point, I think, Leo, quite a few times throughout it, you were talking about habitual behavior. So I think some of it comes down to just us being pedantic about the language and whether or not we're measuring habitual behavior, whether we're using habits. And I think you were probably measuring habitual behavior, which still is really exciting because that's ultimately what we want. There's no point in having habits unless it leads to behavior. So it is that thing of, do these things predict what it is we want to look at? So look, nobody else has put up their hand yet. So I wanted to ask something around that whole frequency thing. And so it was, and the example you gave was beautiful, like if you go to mass on a Sunday or on a Christmas Eve, and you do that for 20 years, then that's very habitual behavior. And obviously the context might be different because you've moved house and so on and so forth, versus the brushing your teeth, hopefully a couple of times a day. Did you find those patterns were consistent across the different behaviors, not just in health, but across everything? Because I feel that some of that might be coming down to the thing you talked about earlier about memory, is how much do we really remember of the frequency of what we're doing? Sorry, does that question, it made a whole lot of sense in my head.
So the behavior that we didn't have any. If I come, you don't see my slide. But if you look at the behavior, which shows where there were nothing like mass, like they were more like.
But that was the example you gave.
Daily habits.
Yeah.
But sorry, I didn't really grasp the question. Sorry.
So sorry. So most of the things you were looking at, you're saying were things that should have been happening more frequently.
Yeah.
So you didn't look at things like screening behaviors that maybe are annual or any of those other health behaviors.
No. Yeah,
okay, sorry, I thought when you gave
behavior.
that example that you had done, because I would be curious as to whether
that would be
this could be
interesting
used for.
see.
Yeah, because we always have that debate as whether or not if you go for your breast screening every year, that is actually habitual behavior versus something that you just do once a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, we're actually out of time, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry, I talked too much.
No, that was wonderful. That was great. I think we've got a shy audience here today who just wanted to listen, so it worked out perfectly. So Pippa, sorry, you've just put your hand up.
No, sorry, I was being random. I was trying to clap, but I did the wrong thing. I was just
Fair
saying,
enough.
well
okay,
done, lovely, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Leo, for coming along. Thank you to our audience. For me, it's 5:30. I'm going home. For the rest of you, have a wonderful work day, and see you all next time.
Have a nice day. Bye. Have a nice day.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much. Super interesting. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And so, Nora, the thing should just be emailed to me. No, she's gone. Okay, so there is a recording, so I'll be in touch, Leo. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thank you.